Welcome, everybody. We're here at the pairing hangout where we actually talk about some pair programming. We have a few devs here who have paired for quite a while, and they're going to answer some common questions that are out there about pairing. Hopefully, you can learn something about it if you haven't done it before. We'll talk about how we do it. So I'll start off by having people introduce themselves. So James.
Howdy, I am James Holmes. I'm based in Melbourne, and I've been doing TDD for about 10 years, out of a career of about 20 to plus, anyway, years of programming, and pairing for about as long, about 10 years. And the first time I started pairing was with a very small team, just 6 people, and everything we did was in pairs. Everything we did was TDD'd. We just absolutely just absorbed XP and lived it. And we had some of the best outcomes I'd ever had in my career up to that point. So I've sold on it from doing that. And the first project we did that in, they loved it so much, they actually made us a little plastic award for our services, and we put it on the shelf. It was the best thing. So, yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Fagner.
All right. My name is Finite. I live currently in Sydney, Australia, on a permanent resident visa. I'm natural from Brazil, so I'm not natural from Australia. And I've been writing software for 10 years. 8 of those years, it's been on test-driven development. Now, that doesn't mean that all those 8 years I've been doing test-driven development right. So I recently learned how to do test-driven development right while in Australia. And I'm always learning better ways to actually get the value out of test-driven development. It's a very interesting thing that every time you believe that you've learned enough, but you haven't, you always get some value out of it. Now, in regards to pair programming, I've been pair programming for about 5 years now. I started in Brazil, and I actually started pair programming when I was working remotely with a team from a project called Project Australia from a company in Brazil in Porto Alegre called the Server. And they assembled some teams from Brazil to be able to come to Australia and work here in the company. And I was working remote with a few of the folks there. And that's when they introduced me to most of the values that I started to learn since then about pair programming. And they introduced me remotely, which is interesting. First time pairing, it was in Brazil on that remote team on that project. And the person who introduced me to pair programming was a man called Will Mendes. He worked in some meetups in Bahia, which is a state from Brazil. He was very prominent on the community. He came to Australia along with me on the same team. I learned significantly more about pair programming since then here in Australia than I guess I would have learned anywhere else. So that's my story about pair programming.
Awesome. Jamie?
Hi, I'm Jamie. I've been professionally writing software for 16 years now. I've been doing it for over 20 because if it's not your hobby, it's kind of hard to get into this business. I've been practicing test-driven development for 6 years and pair programming for just over 2 years. My first job doing pair programming, I actually searched them out because they were practicing XP, and I found them on WeDoTDD.com. In Southern California. That was my first time ever pairing, and it was certainly scary because I'd never done that before. You're putting yourself out there. Luckily, it was at a company that cared about growing engineers and teaching them on the job, and it was a great experience. And I wish more companies would at least try it. And all the companies that I'm working for now and speaking with, I'm always trying to encourage them to at least try it for some reasons, and hopefully we'll get into those topics later today.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. I'm Dave Schinkel. I have been TDDing for 6 years now, been coding since 2000. Been pairing for, I want to say, almost 2 years now. I started pairing in 2013. I was working at a company and just had learned about Eighth Light and Uncle Bob. And just by sheer stroke of luck, they came to where we were working, and I actually was able to pair with them and learn from a guy named Mark and another guy named Eric. And Eric was the lead on the learning for Eighth Light. And so I learned a ton, not just about pairing, but TDD. And then actually now I'm doing it every day as well at a new company or an XP shop. So yeah, total 2 years. It was interesting when I first started pairing. I didn't know what to do. But, basically my pair just said, hey, I need the keyboard when he wanted to code. And that was pretty easy. So because he would just kind of drive and just when he needed to. Otherwise I would drive. So but yeah, that's my history. I also run WeDoTDD.com that Jamie mentioned that lists companies and teams. Individual teams practicing test-driven development. So if you're looking for a company doing that, look at my website, WeDoTDD.com. I also have TDD TV on YouTube, which got streaming Codecast, and then I've got Dimecast, which are just Codecasts in general on YouTube as well. So today we're going to kind of answer some questions that are out there by people. They're common questions usually about pair programming. So let me bring up the first question here. I guess we've got Jamie as starting out that question, so I'll give Jamie the first start on that.
Sure. So the question is, what is what is the pair programming setup? And the core mantra really is to just be comfortable, make it ergonomic. The question was, do you share one monitor? Well, you can. It's hard to do that for an entire day. And where I was working, each person had a monitor in front of them. So one computer with the screens mirrored, so you're always looking at the exact same code. And I think that works pretty effectively. You don't want to be looking up at a TV for too long. It's all about being comfortable. And to make it comfortable, having each person having their own keyboard helps. Each person having their own mouse helps. And then now you have to immediately ask, well, what happens if both people try to use it at the same time? And generally that will naturally work itself out. You'll see the other person reach for the keyboard because they want to contribute. But that's the basic setup. Whatever can makes it more efficient for you to stay there for multiple hours, because that's generally what you're going to be doing if you're pairing all day. And it's a little different if you do mobbing. Mobbing's like an extension of that, but we're not going to get into that topic today, I don't think. Dave, do you have a picture of a desk?
Yeah, let me bring this up real quick.
And while he's looking for that, the desk generally for pairing is going to be longer than a normal desk because you want to have space between yourself and the other person. You can't just use a normal desk. You'll be really tight, and that's it's constricting to do that for 2 hours at a time, 8 hours a day. That's hard. So finding those longer desks, getting monitors that can do the mirroring themselves tends to help because a lot of laptops can't do two monitors for some reason effectively. But it's really important to have the same screen. And one thing to be careful of when you're pairing is don't point at your monitor because they're looking at their monitor. It's like the most common thing you do on the first day of pairing is you start pointing at the screen and they have no idea what you're talking about. So that's generally why I like turning on line numbers, and then you talk about, line 53, there's a problem there. Or, hey, add this new thing on line 55 and a half. That's my cue for splitting a line. Why don't you walk us through, Dave, what we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is where I work currently, and these are our pairing stations. These are team stations, and here we have on each side a pair here, and then a pair on the other side. And at the very end, we usually have like a delivery lead that sits there with us, kind of like we all sit at the same table. It's a fused table, and so yeah, we've got the pairing stations, 2 monitors here, and we mirror the monitors. So someone will plug in their laptop on one of the monitors and then mirror their laptop across the other monitor. And that cord that they plug into their laptop acts as a charger as well. And we've got a mouse and a keyboard for each pair. And we also have a hub in the middle. So that hub is what we connect our laptops to. And then once you connect to the hub, you can connect other devices into the hub, and they're shared at that point because the hub's helping you to share that stuff across both screens. And then, yeah, that's pretty much our setup. It's pretty nice.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. I noticed that you have different keyboards.
Yeah, so we'll have clients, and sometimes the clients have Windows PCs. They'll want to plug in their Windows mouse, or even I use a Logitech mouse. I hate the Mac mouse. So depending on what keyboard you want to use, you can kind of plug it in and use your own. So that's why they're different. Everybody has kind of their style, what they're used to. So
one of the annoying things about pairing with these Bluetooth keyboard and mice is that if you change pairs, your keyboard is now paired to a machine across the room, and that can get pretty annoying.
It does happen.
So generally what you'll do is we'll have a USB hub and just have everything plugged into that hub. And then when you switch laptops, you're not using Bluetooth. So you don't have to worry about charging them. And
That's a good idea. Yeah, that happens all the time. I'll move a mouse and the person's like, hey, you're moving my screen. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Cords are nicely stashed under the desk. So we get them tied up so they don't, make a mess all over the place. A lot of times we'll have our CI builds on a screen. So at this picture, we have this huge TV up here, and we'll show our integrated builds up there, our tests running, build failures at the end there, so that the team's aware of what's going on. We'll also show other teams, if we're remote pairing with them, they'll show up here in a unified hangout so we can actually talk to them. That's how we do remote pair programming. If we're on site, we'll see the remote team there, which is nice too.
I noticed these monitors are like very high up in the air. That's nice.
They are. You can move them down. They're very flexible, so you can move them down and whatnot. So it's really nice. They're really nice arms attached to them. So we also have these over here that are not really pairing stations, but as you grow, you could pair at them. They're huge. I think they're like 40 inches or something like that. They're just big monitors. So yeah, we have those sitting there in case we need them as well. So if you're doing like a global day of code retreat, those are perfect. So if you run out of space. For those who don't know, Global Day of Code Retreat, it's a national day where everybody gets together, various locations, and they do katas together, so you can actually see other locations doing it. You practice your katas and whatnot. I'm sure everyone here has probably done some of that too. Yeah, that's my bit on the setup.
Just a quick on the remote pairing. So I would usually, when I set up for remote pair, I use VS Code, live sharing for coding, or the remote control of the software that we're using to be able to have the remote call. when we're doing the one keyboard and one mouse setup, which helps to be able to be in sync and all that, usually we either use the two screens, because then you can, as Jamie said, to see one screen and mirror that. When we are using the ping pong, when one writes the test and another one writes the production code, it's good to, if it's in the same, either the one keyboard or one mouse or the ping pong, if it's in the same screen, it's good to have at least share with the wheels to make sure that we can move to the other place.
For us, obviously we've been doing a lot of remote pairing lately, given the current situation. And we found that we've been using a program called Use Together. That's been working great as well. So, and that means that you're not so tied to a specific IDE. Having said that, I would love it if IntelliJ actually just build this stuff in, and there is an ongoing feature request for that. And that gets +1, like they add 10 or 20 +1s to that feature every day now, because this becomes very relevant. But yeah, there's so many tools out there that do this quite well. You're not forced into any particular choice for it.
Yeah, so we've been using Tuple mainly. We've used Screen.io, which is, it's beta right now. It's got its problems. Its latency is pretty bad. You can mob on Screen.io. You cannot mob on Tuple. And so Tuple only has like a third person, but they can't do anything. They can only watch. So we kind of skip back and forth depending on what we're doing. For mobbing, we use Screen.io. Or Use Together. We've used that too.
And Use Together does let you have in groups. Yeah. So.
Right. All right. So the next question is pair programming more efficient? What are the pros to pair programming over individual programming? And I think we have James starting on this one next.
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. Anyone with a traditional mindset, or whatever we want to call it, will look at two people sitting at one computer and thinking that has to be wasteful. And look, it's on its face value, sure, you might assume that, but a lot of what pair programming is about is that mindset of building in quality up front, that goes hand in hand with TDD. And there's so many ways it reinforces that. You're making sure that there's more than one person's head involved in any particular piece of work. So you've got more perspectives, which means that you're more likely to find edge cases or, think about a wider part of the problem. Even down to simple things like typos and minor things will get caught by your pair much more frequently than if you're by yourself. So you're actually, over the whole cycle of getting software written to solve people's problems, you're getting a speed boost really, or at least you're going to be not any slower than having just one person at one machine, because of that whole turnaround of bugs and problems and edge cases and all these other things that are involved. Done correctly, obviously, anything you can do wrong and you don't get the benefits. But if you get good at it and you pair properly, you will find that it isn't any less efficient, and gains far outweigh those benefits over time. When you start it, of course, when you first take on, yes, it's going to be worse. That's just a fact. Anything that's radically different to what you're doing previously, that you have to learn what works for you, you have to learn how it works in your context, it is going to be worse to begin with. You've got to fight through that. It's the same when you start TDD. It's the same when if you've been doing things very traditionally with lots of planning and stuff, when you start taking on that more agile mindset, you start documenting a bit less and sort of iterating more. If you first start that without the experience, it's going to be worse, not better. But you can get to a much better place if you keep at it. That's the thing. So you've got to fight through that stuff. And that's why we have retrospective or other kinds of reflection to get better at stuff. It's always the most important thing. That's my simple answer.
Awesome. Jamie?
Yeah, I wanted to add that, pair programming is really built on what companies are already doing anyways with code reviews. You're just doing it instantaneously. So if you're a public company and you need SOX compliance, you have to have these code reviews. Well, a lot of companies do that anyways, and it slows their team down and they don't understand why. Why are we doing these code reviews? Well, there are benefits, and pair programming is just always doing the code review. You're going to catch things way faster and never go down those paths that, turn into dead ends, especially with someone new on the team.
For sure. Fagner?
Yes. So on the question of is pair programming more efficient, I think we need to ask the question, efficient compared to what, right? Because in order to know if it's more or less efficient, we need to have that comparison. Now, if you compare that to solo programming, we need to be very careful on not comparing good solo programming with bad pair programming, and also not to compare good pair programming with bad solo programming, right? Because both of them work very well and they have their merits. Now, that doesn't mean that there are trade-offs between them, and each circumstance requires different ways of doing things, and maybe something in between. Maybe not just full solo, don't talk to anybody. Maybe a solo that you have, maybe, as Jamie said, code review, and some situations where you want to have a full pairing for the whole epic and have someone there because of the circumstances. So, of course, if you always do pairing, you're going to have all the maximum benefits. But we need to be also aware that there is some diminishing returns that over time you achieve by working with the same person. It's good to change people and know that. But anyway, that's that. So, is it more efficient? It depends kind of question. And there are many aspects of the learning, availability of the flow of the work, and the context that people get and unbiased views that people get, which is more efficient than, say, talking through text communication or through even video calls, right? It's better than loses less information than text, but it still loses some information in video calls. So there are those aspects that I believe will be unveiling throughout this hangout. Yeah, I won't say it's more efficient or not. I would say it depends on what you compare, and you need to compare to the right things, not to the good application of one or bad application of the other.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. You can't compare pairing with someone just working on code, because pairing is a combination of writing the code, reviewing the code, cross-team communication. It's all of these things bundled into one. So I certainly wouldn't compare the output of two people pairing and then switching throughout the week versus just them working individually, because there are things they're doing outside of their programming that equates to what they're doing with pairing. They may be writing more documentation or having to spend extra time communicating about their code, when with pairing, they just do it instantaneously. So I think you're right. There's no it's better across the board, because there's so many variables.
I think who defines what's better would be the business and the team that actually looks at it and analyzes to their context. Does it make sense to do pair programming in this context of this job, not the context of the whole project, right? If you say like this, look like silver bullets, like saying I'm gonna do a REST for the whole architecture, I'm gonna do event-driven design for the whole architecture, I'm gonna do RPC for the whole architecture. So it doesn't work like that. There are trade-offs. So that, just to put on top of what you're saying, yes, we need to analyze the trade-offs and exactly what we compare with.
And one of the other things that it's all related to that, if you find you're in a situation where limiting work in progress is really going to help you with flow efficiency, and again, so that question of efficiency is, well, what kind of efficiency are you talking about? But yeah, pairing is a natural way of limiting work in progress, because you're halving the number of things you're doing at once if you've got everyone working in pairs, for example. And just down to simple things like you're going to naturally reduce things like merge conflicts as well, because you've got two people working on the same branch or the same part of code if you're doing mainline development or whatever. So there's little things again, and yeah, it all depends on your context whether that's useful for you. But if you're trying for flow efficiency, that's just going to be a natural win.
Yeah, you reminded me of another point I heard from the mob programming community, is when you're mobbing, you have 3 or more people working on one computer, and what they're optimizing for is the business flow, right? They're not optimizing for individual efficiency. They're optimizing for the flow of the features you're building and contributing to the value of the business. And I think that's the same thing with pair programming. We're optimizing for the flow of the thing you're putting through. So if you're pairing with someone who, you're doing a full stack feature and you've got a solid back end and a solid front end on the same pair, they're going to complete that feature together faster than if it was split apart and had to communicate in different ways.
Yeah, so my take on it is there's that storming, norming, and forming phases, and then performing. So when you first start out, most people are nervous. They don't know the person. It's the imposter syndrome, right? So that thing is pretty high at first, because you don't, the whole thing about pairing is don't worry about not knowing stuff, but you can't help it when you first start pairing. It's just a little bit part of it, right? So when you first form, everybody's polite. They're just getting to know each other. They're anxious. And so you have to be aware that this is what's going on while you are pairing at first, and just kind of relax if you can. Don't worry about things too much, because you're not there to perform. That comes later. So that comes after you've done your storming and your norming. So understand that when you first start out, any team starts out, even if they've done pairing before, you go through that forming phase, get to know each other. And then once you get to know each other, people start to kind of push against each other, like, hey, I think we should do it this way or that way. And so that's just a natural part of it. You've got different learning styles and they'll bump up against each other. And so you're going to have conflict. It's not perfect. And that's your storming phase. Just understand it's going to happen. And as a coach or leader or lead or whoever you are, project manager, whatever. You got to help that out. You got to go over there and help your pairs get past those issues. And that's where you learn to communicate better. And then you've got the norming phase where everybody understands each person has something they can contribute. We know each other. We know we do what we're good at. And you start to do team norming where you come together and say, okay, here's the things we think as a team we should start doing. We were seeing that works for us. And once you get past that phase, you're doing performing where you're just really going fast. So know that those phases are coming. The first things I get out of pairing is I learn 3 times faster. So whether or not we're producing stuff faster yet doesn't matter. The team's learning 3 times faster. Where they're getting past obstacles 3 times faster because your pair usually knows something you don't. And if not, you go research it. But a lot of times, half the time, they know the answer that you don't know. And so you're moving past those obstacles really fast. And so understand those are the values you get at the beginning and they change towards the end where the team starts to perform and go really fast. Yeah, and you're not alone. So like most places you're solo programming, you've got this command and what does it call it? Command and I forgot, but they're telling you what to do, right? And if you don't get it done, you're in trouble. Well, that shouldn't be the case. It's not what teams are about. And so pairing lets
Command and control. Sorry, you were saying command and control?
Yes, thank you. Command and control. And so that's not what you do when you pair. It's not about command and control. It's about, hey, this pair is working together. Maybe they didn't get a card done, but that's just part of agility. So don't blame people. And so it's nice to a pair is together and they go into the meetings together. And we talk about the cards and that's it. So it's really nice. All right. So next question is.
Another thing is the conflict earlier, right? So the conflict is going to happen, but be aware that it's good that it happens because it's going to happen earlier. It will happen much later in the game. If you're saying the code review, you're battling the keyboard, and then when you talk to each other, you already hate each other. So when you are talking together at the same time, and that conflict get as early as possible. So and people see not in the GitHub on a pull request, people see on the physical environment. So a management can intervene and sort things out if they can, right? If the pair can. So it's another benefit to have those things happening earlier.
Yeah. I don't know if we have a question on like the challenges yet. Yeah, we don't. But one of the challenges is, and one of the things of our culture where I work is direct and personal. You're to be direct and personal, like professional, but like let people know how you're feeling. And so that's where James was talking about pair retros, or if you're pairing with somebody, just let them know how you feel. If you don't like what they're doing, be nice, but tell them. Don't hide it. Don't bottle it up. And that's an important part because if you're not communicating, things will bubble up later, and that's not fun. So yeah, it's a big part of it. So next question. There's more than one way to skin the cat. So this is where it gets challenging when you pair, when people have different learning styles and also different, approaches to code. So how do you deal with that? This is a tough one. So the thing is, like, a pair is 2 brains, right? And so when there's different styles, you should be experimenting. You should let each other try different things. Even if you don't like what the person's doing, have them do their thing and let them flow with it and see how it works. Maybe it's a good thing, right? Maybe you'll find out that the thing you thought wasn't going to work does. Or maybe you find out the thing that tried doesn't work, and that's okay too. But the thing is, if you're only going with the driver, what he's doing with his preferences, then you're not really pairing. If you're not switching keyboards and you're not trying different approaches, you're not really pairing. So you can also get into what's called, I think it's called mind meld, where you have a navigator tell you what to do, and you're not really able to suggest anything. They're just telling you everything to do. And that's not using 2 minds. That's just one person telling you to write code. So what I'm trying to say is you need to compromise. You need to let each other try their things. If you don't do that, then it's probably not going to work out too well because everybody has their opinions, but you need to be able to try them out together. That's my input on it, really, is how to handle that. If that's not happening, then you're going to have conflict.
Yeah, so for me, obviously working with a new person every time, there's going to be different dynamics, and you generally want to come up with a process that you're going to follow and agree to. And what I found that works is following the Pomodoro. So 20 minutes, we're going to focus on the problem, then take a break. 20 minutes, focus on the problem, take a break. 20 minutes, focus on the problem, and then take a longer break. That at least time boxes what you're working on in shorter iterations. So you have the safety of trying something new. If you're having a problem convincing another engineer to do something or try something, always just say, well, let's try it for 5 minutes, because no one in their right mind is going to say, no, my 5 minutes is way too valuable to learn this thing that you want to do. And it's a trick. You can use it if you're not pairing. You can always time box. But generally, whenever I'm pairing with someone, I like to pick a style of pairing and agree on that ahead of time. And then that just locks it in, right? So I've identified 4 styles of pairing. If you're okay with me sharing them, I'll start off with the least effective to the most effective that I've found. So the least effective is what's called the backseat driver. This is where my pair is, at the keyboard and I'm behind them telling them which direction to go all the time. That's not a good place to be because it's distractive. We're not collaborating. I'm in the back of the car yelling at you which way to turn, and that's not good. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you got to inch them along the way because they don't know the style of the language or the syntax or whatever. Another style is what's called the bus driver or the tour guide. I'm at the keyboard and I'm driving and I'm telling you everything that's happening and you're not even being involved. You're along for the ride. Sometimes you have to do that, but it's generally not a great tool to use all day long. Now let's move into the more effective ones, which is more common, the driver navigator, where one person's typing at the keyboard and the second person is telling them the general direction that you want to go. And if you ever have a change in direction, you might want to switch who's driving and who's navigating. It depends. That takes me to the last one that I like the most, which is ping pong pairing. I think someone mentioned it earlier in this cast, where the first person writes and then gets it to fail and then hands the keyboard over to the next person to get it pass. And then once they make it pass, they write a test and then pass it back to me. And it can be a challenge. It can be a game. There are a variety of ways you can use ping pong pairing. If you go to Global Day of Code Retreat, that's a common way to pair. But those are the 4 styles that I've found, and I vary between them depending on what we're working on. But generally, if you don't have one of these styles down, it can fall apart really quickly.
So the question was, there are more than one way to skin a cat. So right. How would you balance different styles of pair programming? Now, it goes to my point earlier, right? We need to not just compare to something, right? Because that will take ages to list all the trade-offs and the comparisons. But I think what we can do is tell what pair programming is good at and look at the advantages and the potential disadvantages in given context, right? So what I can see, for example, in learning skill. So say that I'm not very familiar in event-driven design. I pair with someone who is, and then I will learn how event-driven design works, or I'll get better at it. Now, you can argue that okay, you don't need pair programming for that if you already know how event-driven design works. Sure, for that criteria, perhaps you don't need it. But there are other attributes that you might want to look at. For example, having more context of the code or the technical context of what's being done there. If you want to have better technical context of it, you can sit down with someone. Now, you can also argue that okay, but if the code is self-documented, then I don't need to have that context, because I can build up the context in the code itself. If you put the how on the code in a self-documented code and the why as comments as the code documentation, then I don't need to have that context as much. But now, okay, cool. Those are the technical things. Now we've got to the business things. So learning the domain and have the context of the domain. That's the kind of stuff that you cannot have very easily in the code. You can if you apply all the domain-driven design goodness and all that. But still, it's not about looking at the context of that change in the domain in the code. It's about understanding the why of that. And you cannot put that in a comment because that changes all the time. And sometimes the why is one, and it becomes the other. The same functionality goes towards a different direction. Going with the developer and having that context straight away from what that developer, or maybe not just a developer, a PO or a BA, business analyst, a product owner, understands about that and pairing with them, then you can get a good understanding of all the context behind why that feature was developed for the user and what's the outcome for the user. Now, otherwise, you would have, executive talking to a product owner talking to the business analyst talking to the developer then handing over the work to another developer. So how many hops of information do you have there? And the more hops, the more you lose information. The wireless telephone, I'm not sure if you're aware, that, you start one person in a circle, and then that person tells a story, and then when the story comes back, it's a totally different story. So the more hops, the worse. I've seen one hop already losing completely the whole story. Depends on the quality of the communication with people. Now, unbiased decisions, I make a technical decision. There's no bias there. You can do that in code review too, but then you have the body language. You have a better way of express yourself, and reducing the truck or bus factor, in which if you get hit by a bus or win the lottery, then the flow continues, as you said before about the flow. And there are disadvantages, such as if you're working in an open source environment where you do not have access to people to be able to talk to them in a two-way conversation quicker, then you need to develop through comments, and maybe it won't be pair programming. It will be maybe different commits in the same PR, or maybe different PRs. It won't work that way if you don't have access directly to those people. And if you build an RFC, or say a media type for the web, or another protocol for the web, you would write a document with a certain parameters, respective parameters, and then other people would review, and that's pretty good. I mean, the web has born like that. People didn't actually sit in a room all the time to be able to come up with the HTTP specification. So different developing, and I would be very keen to see different people using pair programming and solo programming for the right reasons, and not just either one always or another one, either pair programming always or no pair programming always. That would be very hard for, I believe.
Cool.
Just that I've seen some of the anti-patterns that you originally described in your answer in real life, just in case anybody thinks we're like talking straw man arguments or anything. I have sat with someone who, as a driver, just typed and didn't talk about what they were doing, and I couldn't navigate because they were just, everything was just coming out at like a million miles a minute. They could type at about 1,000 words an hour, and I type at about 1,000 words an hour. But then, and the opposite is true as well. I've seen people who, as my navigator, have dictated every character that I should be writing. So exactly those things you were talking about. These happen, and they're just not effective. It's no longer pairing. Yeah, it's something else. I don't know what it is, but it's not terribly valuable anyway. And that's when you do start getting into those things where it becomes less efficient, just to go back to a previous question. But yeah, that you do need to adjust these styles, and that reflection helps you work on, are these styles working together? What can we learn from each other when we do have different styles? That's the important stuff, yeah.
Some of the things that come to mind is when I first pair somebody, I'll try to ask them, how do you like to pair? So Jamie mentioned a few different styles, and so did you. Everybody did here. And I'll ask them, what do you prefer? Because some people over remote prefer something even different. I'll ask that question. We've talked about 3 different situations that the navigator dictates too much, the driver doesn't talk enough, the driver talks too much. I fall into the driver talks too much. So that's a problem for me. And to try to find the flow, sometimes it's hard to know those roles. And if you haven't prepared a long time, it's tougher. And that's where I think pair retros come in, because then you can find out what you could improve on. So it's tricky. Like, this is the tricky part of pairing. I've always been told by the principal artisans that I work with is it's a skill. It's just a skill like anything else. You're not going to be good at it at first. There's going to be conflicts. I think patience is the number one thing. I've had a really aggressive navigator at work, kind of a know-it-all, and this guy would just tell me to do everything, and he'd get frustrated if I wasn't going fast enough, and he would just tell me everything. I'm like, look, slow down, hold on. You got to slow down and be patient. So if you're not being patient and you can't slow yourself down, and you're in a rush to get cards out the door, pairing is it's just going to be abrasive all the time. So
when we do mod programming and another team that I worked on, we did a 5 minutes retro at the end of the day, every day. That helped a lot to be able to get as early as possible the conflicts, even if the conflicts were hidden, right? Those would raise in those 5 minutes at the end of the day.
All right, we don't have too much time left, so let's do some rapid answering of questions. So the next one is how to start if no one has any experience pairing. So who wants to start off on this one?
I can start working together and point out to the waste that is happening as you work, so that eventually they will make the decision themselves that pair program is the way to go, if it is really. And of course, point out the benefits and the drawbacks, and then point the waste. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I can chime in if we have time. So at the start of a project is a great time to pair, and then you can split off if that's not working for you, or if you've satisfied what you needed to learn as a team, and then go individually if that's your thing. But generally at the beginning of a project is a great time to pair.
So I've recently mobbed, and I'm inexperienced in mobbing, but we did this for a couple months at work. I find mobbing to be a really good place to start as a team, and then branch off into pairs later, because you're all in sync on the continuous integration, your tests, your architecture is kind of, you do some thin slices at first. So mobbing at first is nice, and then doing pairing later is nice. One thing I wanted to show real quick is there's a tool that one of our principal artisans developed where I work, and it's pretty awesome. It's called coupling, and this will help with even new teams pairing, or new pairs, or new to programming, new to pairing. So coupling is the tool where you create a tribe, so that's your team. You enter information about your team, and it's configurable here. So once you add that team, you start adding people to it. Here's my team. I've added everybody in here to it. So here we are. Here's our team. So what's nice about this is there's 2 ways to decide your pair. You can just kind of switch when you want to. You can switch every day. You got to define that schedule as a team. this will keep track of who's already paired, so you can just spin it, and it will set you up with pair you haven't paired in a while with. And so we kind of use this quite a lot inside the company, and it's really nice. You can actually use it yourself. It's out there. If you want to go ahead and go to this is from Rob Murdoch. He created this app. It's open source too. But it's really nice to use this because it just says, hey, you two should pair. If you don't like it, you can always drag it and just change up this pair, but it kind of helps people out to instead of sitting there asking who should be next. So that's my take on it. All right, so next question. What is pair programming? I don't know if we need to answer that question now, so maybe next question after this. How often do you rotate pairs? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the quick answer is 2 people, 1 computer.
Yes. How often do you rotate? And this is interesting. Rotate pairs on a team.
We did it daily. Every day you picked a different pair.
And we're currently doing it weekly because we're in a situation where we're having to work to get a lot of the context on what we're doing. And because most of the people we need to work with are in the US, we have a great time zone problem. So we're finding that letting a pair soak it up for a week is working better for us. But again, these things it's just context. If you're in a team that understands their problem quite well, daily rotation is going to be much better because then you get that sort of spread of approaches and stuff.
So in one of the teams, I changed weekly. Very long ago, and recently we were not being very good at rotating pairs, so we went for more programming that turned out to be more effective to the project that we're working on and worked pretty well. After we did that more programming for a long time, I would say, I'm not sure if it was a year or something like that, and then we managed to do the work ourselves, but then communicate in sort of an ad hoc way. So that's how often I rotate pairs and why I rotate. So why I rotate is, I'm not sure if I want to go to the why I rotate, but yeah, to make sure that the knowledge is disseminated between the whole team. So, and then more programming also helps that because everybody's the same computer, same screen, and we rotate in that case the navigators, not the driver. So many navigators, and then the driver changes every 50 minutes on more programming.
Interesting. I know we started out when I first started pairing at my company. We started doing changing pairs every Monday and Wednesday. So you have 2 days and you have 3 days. Later on, I heard that people were used to just doing it every day, and I was like, oh man, that's too much context switching. We can't do that. But one day it came up to me to make the decision to do a tiebreaker, and I said, okay, let's go for it. Let's do it every day. And I actually found that to be the best. The context switching wasn't bad, and we were able to learn more because we were rotating on more cards more frequently. So I prefer that now, daily rotations. And I think most of the teams I work with, as far as I know, most of them like to rotate daily. This is interesting. How many hours of pairing and certain teams require a certain amount of hours. How many hours do you get done realistically in the day, per day?
Pair sometimes the whole day, but at least I pair either if I'm pairing in a task, I pair the whole task. I don't pair halfway. Say I go pair with someone, then go pair someone else. That's not pairing. That's actually just going check, right? As James said, I don't know what it's called, right? But it's not pair programming or no pairing, but then communicate through async ways, say email or pull requests. But it's not about how many hours I pair. It's which task I pair, which task I don't pair based on the situation. So I think the question it should be probably thought in a different way. Not how many hours, but which kind of tasks. And it depends as well, which kind of tasks, and depend on the context of the team and all that.
Pairing is exhausting, or at least it can be early on. So doing it 8 hours a day just is so improbable. Like if you can pull that off, wow, I want to learn your styles.
You don't want to.
But I think generally if there's no extra meetings beyond the typical ceremonies that you do, I think 6 hours is about the max that I could see pairing.
We did full day, but we did some breaks in, say, 10 minutes break every hour or every 2 hours. Unless we were in the flow and nobody wanted to leave. So we just continued because we were happy.
Yeah, so the Pomodoro, is the timer you can put on and to force each other to take breaks. And I just was off a team that did that. We were mobbing and we did that, and it was awesome. The problem is you'll get pairs who only care about getting stuff done. They want nose to the grindstone. It's not healthy. Your eyes need to have a break. Your mind needs to have a break. So I've been on teams that have done one or the other. Some teams don't do it at all. Some pairs don't want to do it at all. But I really think that the norms should, in my opinion, force breaks to be healthy. And, it's always something that you can try with a pair. If they don't want to do it, you can't force them to do it. But yeah, breaks are important. And so Pomodoro, I really like to use for sure. As far as limit of hours, I think we usually go by 6, but we might end up with 4 some days due to meetings. So 4 to 6 is usually the range that we usually get in per day. And since we do actually pair every day, so what do you do if the pairing partner's out of the office?
I can answer that one. On a team of 4, if that ever happens, then you've got one person just with nothing to do. And generally, we would just switch to mobbing. So they would join a pair, and it would be 3 people mobbing. That's one style.
Or in the case of the person is not sick, the person just out of office, say working from home, then I would do remote pair programming as normal. And it would lose information because of all the technical problems that it can have between going to communicate working from home. But it's just a loss. It's not really a complete, it's not zero. Right? And then we'll figure out the tools to be able to do the pair programming remotely, but it would happen if the person is not sick.
I personally, if you're rotating quite often, I personally kind of like breaks sometimes, to be honest. Like if I'm just coding alone for one day, as long as it's not too long, if it's a one day, I think having an odd man out actually can be refreshing sometimes. Or mobbing's fine too. To me, mobbing's a little more relaxing. I don't know why. I just feel like it is. But one of the others fine with me. There's some teams who want to also always make sure you're pairing, always make sure you're mobbing. I think exceptions to the rule, as long as it's like a day, I think should be fine, just to kind of relax. So, doesn't pair programming cost the business a business more?
So it seems to me this is a little bit related to the efficiency question, and I would probably throw the same arguments at this question as I would as the efficiency one. Total cost of the technique won't be any more than single programming in many contexts anyway. Again, it does depend on the context, as people have said. But yeah, you get so many benefits. Jamie said, for example, if you're doing solo programming, even if it's good solo programming, you really need review and you need documentation and all these other things to make up for the lack of communication. And those things are things that have to be done outside of the programming time. Whereas when you are pairing, the pairing takes care of code review. It takes care of the documentation part to an extent because you're sharing information, socializing it, especially when you rotate. So the act of doing the programming is taking care of those other things, and therefore, swings and roundabouts, it's not going to cost more.
I'll take a different argument, and I'll say it does cost the business more, but I think the business gets more value out of that cost than they would with just solo engineers. Imagine if your team right now they're not pairing. Imagine what would happen after a year if they paired every day. Would those engineers be better than they were before? If they're mixing in with more senior engineers and sharing that knowledge with junior engineers? I would argue yes. I would say they are going to be much, much more talented of a team, both with their soft skills and with their technical skills, because they've leveled up every day, every week, whereas your competition, they may level up every code review. Sometimes people don't put a lot of effort and energy into their code reviews. It still takes their time. They wouldn't get the same out of it as if they paired with someone building that code.
Yes. So what Jamie is talking about is probably the compound interest that you get over time through having many developers sharing knowledge between each other. I like to use the analogy of a brain is made of neurons, and the ability of the neurons to communicate to each other is what makes it so efficient. And the same thing for the team. A team is made of people, and the ability of people to communicate to each other is what makes the team efficient. It's all about the interactions, right? So there are no interactions. There is no benefit or very little benefit taken out of it. Now, doesn't pair programming cost the business more? Well, it helps the context switch, as James mentioned before, where you don't have that big cost of context switch. The cost is not as high as if you were waiting for a PR to come in, or have 3 PRs, or a lot of work in progress, or whatever that is. Wait for someone to respond and things like that. You would lose that time. You would grab a coffee and never come back, or work on something else. But yeah, as in short term, there is a cost. If you apply correctly, there's still a cost, but it's a better cost it's a good cost, right? I would say an investment. Right? And no, there's no cost to a business in the long term if you apply correctly. Now, here's the catch, right? Yes, there is a big cost short term if you're applying correctly. And yes, there's an even bigger cost long term if you applying correctly. Because what is applying correctly? I'm pairing 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. No, you're not, right? You're applying incorrectly. I am always fighting with my pair. No, you're not applying correctly. I'm not sorting out that fight. Or I'm always spending my time on bike sharing, or things like, learning astrophysics. Something like that, which isn't related to the job. You will be worse, right? Because it's 2 people doing that. So be aware that you need to do it correctly. And sometimes, if the team doesn't have the ability to do it correctly, hire someone, agile coach, a software crafter, or someone who can go there and consult and help the team or the company. If not, do what's the best for them. If they don't like pair programming, then don't do pair programming, because they won't just learn from the thin air, right? And that's very important to say. They will see this hangout and say, "Oh, now that's good, pair programming," and 90% doesn't want to. It will be worse. So be aware of that.
You triggered a thought of mine, which is safety. So if you don't have a safe place to work, meaning if you can't express your opinions as each person in the team without being slapped on the hand, or you don't have safety in regards to what you were talking about, a coach or a lead who is there kind of listening in, but doesn't point, pick people out and just ream them, but just treats everybody kind of equal and helps resolve issues in a neutral way. That safety has to be there, I think, for pairing to actually work. And another part of the safety. Right? Yeah, exactly. So if you're not doing pair retros, and if you're doing pair retros and your pair's not telling you anything you can improve, you kind of have to say, hey, why don't you have anything for me to improve? Is there something you're not telling me? You can, it's a safe place. Tell me what you're thinking. I want to be better. So please tell me something. Because if they're always saying good things or not telling you anything, it's not really a pair retro. So safety is many different ways. If it's not there, I don't see how pairing can work effectively. I just don't see it. So that's a lot of places you go to, safety is not there. So the places where they're successful, safety is there. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's awesome to have people who have been doing this for a long time to come together and share with you in case you're wanting to try it yourself. Maybe this will help you. We're going to have more of these hangouts in the future. Also, if you have any questions in the comments, please feel free to post them. And I think even some in here might actually answer your comments as well. We like to have a dialogue in the comments here under the video. Till next time, hope you enjoyed it. I'll say everybody have a good weekend.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. See ya.
All right, thank you.